Josh from Alter Ego Comics, and I'm here today to talk to you about Stuffed Fables, a very cool new game from Plaid Hat Games, who you may remember from such hits as Dead of Winter and Mice and Mystics, and this is tagged as an adventure book game, and what that means is the game is a book. And it's super awesome. I'll give you kind of the Reader's Digest version of how to play real quick so you get an idea what we're about. So in this game, you're going to be playing as stuffed animals. The first adventure, the first story, the little girl, the kind of main character, your girl, it's her first night in the big girl bed. Her parents have gotten rid of the crib, and so now she has lost the magical protection of the crib, and it is the stuffed animal's job to protect her from the forces of darkness while she sleeps. And really everything you need to know about the theme for the game is implicit in that statement. And we've got really beautiful, very kind of dark, whimsical art throughout the adventure. And the way this guy works is you've got text segments to read that set up the thing, and you do get to make choices. It's almost like a choose-your-own adventure that can affect the outcome. But then as you proceed on, we wind up with areas where you've got the adventure stuff on the left that'll give you, what bad guys to bring out and what you're going to face, what challenges and choices you have to make. And then on this side, it is actually a gridded tactical map. So if you lay it out, one person reads and then everybody plays on the table. So it's sort of a built-in game, and then every page as you proceed is like that. You proceed through the story, you get a new location, a new tactical map, and this goes on forever. There are 7 different stories in here. Each one's timed out at about an hour, hour and a half, and that's going to depend on your skill level, how well you do. And the whole thing, the whole thing, playing through all 7 adventures, also gives you a big kind of ending, whether you've succeeded or failed or done badly, done well. Get different options there. So what do you put on this awesome flexible playmat? Well, this box is chock full of minis. All of your heroes have a hero card with unique abilities. So you've got 6 different hero stuffies. Now the game only plays 4 players, but that does mean that you can have a different selection of choices for the 6 different fun. So we've got Lumpy, who's a elephant, or actually my assumption is he's actually a heffalump, because Lumpy, elephant, heffalump, Pooh Bear, stuffed animals, that's a thing, right? We've got Flops, who is sort of like a bunny ranger. And while most of the people don't have, innate abilities, like this guy's better with ranged attacks, they do have sort of abilities that synergize well. So like Flops' always-on ability lets him re-roll green dice, which are frequently used for ranged attacks. Who else have we got here? We've got Lionel, who is a lion, obviously. And he's really good at ranging attacks. And the quality on these miniatures is just really, really great. I've seen some people online painted them up. I may be having to paint mine up here fairly soon because they just they're too cute and too awesome to pass up painting. And the quality's really good. They've got great detail. And I think they're going to take paint really, really well. Let's see who's that. That is Piggy, who's a pig, and I love their weapons. The plunger arrow and the rubber band bow for the rabbit. You've got a meat tenderizing mallet on Lumpy there. Lionel, of course, uses his ferocious claws and fangs, so he doesn't need a weapon. Piggle, he can still equip a weapon in the game, though. Piggle has a rattle as like a mace and I don't know if that's a casino chip or what is that, as his shield. Oh no, I think it's a Play-Doh lid. It's a Play-Doh lid. That's what it is. And then this guy is great. He's a ancestral stuffed animal named Stitch. He was handed down. He's kind of handmade from socks, and he's sort of the crotchety old grandfather. He's using the old #2 pencil there. And then the last stuffy, the last hero we get is Theodora, also known as Thea, and she is the little girl's favorite stuffy. She's a bar. And she's got, what is that, a letter opener, I think? I assume that's a letter opener. She's wielding like a sword. She's got a cool scarf. And she takes her duty as the little girl's protector very seriously. But one of the cool things about this is it's sort of a hybrid between a board game and a role-playing game. The story is fairly linear. You do make choices, and your success and failure do affect how a specific story turns out, and they do affect the larger outcome across the whole series of events. But, you know, it's not a lot of role-playing. It's not, you know, it's not that anything can go World of D&D. that would be kind of intimidating for younger players or for maybe inexperienced parents as dungeon masters. But what these guys are going to fight in their life on the grid is a whole ton of baddies. And these guys are awesome. We've got weird, I don't even know what the hell that is. Stitched, heartless monsters. We've got things that are very reminiscent of the some of the bad guys from Toy Story. We've got sort of a Stitch golem guy with a cleaver. And one thing you'll notice here that's really nice is the different minions, when you have multiple minions of the same sculpt, have different shaped bases. So it's easy to tell, you know, which one is which, the octagonal one, the circular one, so that if you need to differentiate between the two, you can do that. Just really, really great. We've got more of that guy, more of that guy. We've got this weird kind of dog robot. I see, and some of these are, all bad guys in the game are referred to as minions, but there are also leaders and bosses that have different abilities and slightly different rules. Lets them do different stuff. And there's another dog guy. So many dog guys. Oh, and we've got this great four-armed robot of whimsy. You know, and these guys just tower over the little stuffies. So I love that from a tabletop perspective. The scale and the scope of the adventure is awesome. Then we've got the Dark Wizard, who's sort of your big bad, presumably, depending on which adventure you're playing. We've got super creepy sideways head version of the little girl that, you know, is going to haunt my dreams. And then we've got, I'm pretty sure that's the bad guy from The Incredibles. So we've got a whole bunch of cool bad guys. We've got a whole bunch of heroes. And one kind of neat thing, they've really embraced the theme here. Well, the game plays great with kids. They suggested the age is 8 and up. I know a lot of 6-year-olds that could easily play this game. So it just depends on the kid, their familiarity with, you know, making choices and stuff, and how well they play together as a group. But you could definitely play with younger kids than is on the box, in my estimation. I'm not a parent. Maybe I'm wrong. But there's those guys, and then we've got all kinds of dice of all sorts of different colors and stuff. And so basically what you're going to do in a given turn is at the start of a character's activation, usually the storyteller, the person who's in charge of the book, goes first, but that can change based on the scenario. At the start of your turn, you're going to draw 5 dice. And those 5 dice, each die has a specific different thing it can do. So your, where's my handy-dandy cheat sheet? Every player's got a little cheat sheet that gives them both the turn order on one side and the attribute dice's abilities on the other. Oh! But each die does a different thing. So, for example, the white dice are for stuffing. Now, stuffing is essentially your health, your life points. So every stuffy starts with 5 pieces of stuffing on their card, but they can they'll lose some when they take damage, and they can gain more back. Anytime you have a white die, you roll it. If the number you roll is higher than the amount of stuffing you currently have, you get to add 1 more stuffing. So that's kind of a healing mechanic, and that comes up every time white die are out. Now you can choose to roll the white die individually or together. So if I had, you know, only 2 health, I'm going to want to roll them separately, because the odds of getting a 2 or higher on the white die are pretty good. Whereas if I had 5 health, you know, I might want to roll them both together. I'll only get 1 stuffing out of it, but I have a better chance of succeeding with 2d6 versus a 5 stuffing than not. So black dice, bad stuff happens with black dice. So once you've set up the adventure here, you've got a sort of a track on the side, and every time a black die comes out, it goes on the track. And once it hits the number of characters out, or some other point triggered by the adventure itself, in the case of a specific adventure, the bad guys get a turn, or something happens in the story. So each of the bad guys has their own card, and those are color-coded, and they also have, well, they have a slight color coding for the leader one and then versus the normal ones, and they also have a symbol to show you which shape base it is, so like I said, to distinguish between multiples of the same type of monster. And those will go over here, and when we've got a number of black dice out equal to the number of players, the monsters get to take a turn, they act, they get to hurt us. We'll go over that in a sec. But, so those are the 2 kinds of dice that can come out of the bag that aren't attribute dice. Those are specific things. White dice are always a chance to get more stuffing. Black dice are always bad and always lead towards the bad guys taking their turn. But the other dice we have out, we could get red dice. Now red dice are used for melee attacks. Green dice are used for ranged attacks. Yellow dice are used for perception. So this is like trying to spot things, go through a search action. So if you're in the room, up in the corner of the room, usually there's a little symbol, looks like a spyglass, that tells you how hard it is to find stuff in this location. So for example, in this toy heap, it's a 4. So if I get a 4 or better on my search die, I can draw a card, and now I've got a new thing to play with, or a new option to swap out from one of my existingly equipped items, or I can trade it to one of the other group members. Because sharing is caring, is what I've been told. Yellow, blue. Blue they don't have a unique action, but they're used to resist things. That'll come up in a second. Pink dice, or they call them purple, but the physical dice that come are absolutely pink. The color on the card is absolutely pink. It's the same color as the pig, who, as we all know, is pink. The purple are wild, so they're rolled with other dice to manage. So for example, if I was going to make a melee attack, I could roll a red, which is actually kind of orange, and a purple, and hopefully get a higher number to do a better roll, or a ranged attack, or whatever. The other use for a lot of these dice, beyond specific skill checks, it may say make a search check, or make a yellow check, a perception check, make a resistance check. So that's when you're going to roll a specific colored die, hopefully, if you have one. And the other use is some points on the board, like if you look here on the little girl's bedroom scene, we've got green lines around parts of this. Now these are solid green lines. So that basically, in this case, represents elevation. But what it means in mechanics is it's a green line, which means you have to be using green dice to move over them. So if you wanted to move and try and get through there, you need to include a green dice in what you roll. So we rolled that green, and assuming that 3 was enough, it gets us distance to climb up on top, to leap up on top of the bed with our agility. And there are all sorts of different color restrictions based on exactly what the terrain is. You do occasionally have white borders in here, and those are impenetrable. You can't see through them, you can't move through them. But here in the bathroom, we've got, I believe that's a red or an orange line. We've got a purple line there at the doorway. So, there's different types of things require different types of checks. Right, bathroom, water, strength check, swimming. I got it. Sorry, my brain turns all board games into D&D eventually. But the other thing you can do at the end of your turn, so at the end of your turn, just like in a deck building game like Dominion or DC Deck Builder, at the end of your turn, any dice you have left are forfeit. They're gone, they're going to go back in the bag, you're going to draw 5 more on your next turn. But what you can do is store a die on your sheet, in your sheet spot, which is something that you may want to do, like, oh, there's a blue, I'm going to need that, I can keep that. Now that die, anytime there's a die on your card, if you're being attacked, you can choose to roll that die to defend yourself. If you can exceed the damage, then, or the number you roll on the die is reduced from the damage you take, so that can help you keep your stuffing on the inside, which is where you want it if you're a stuffy. The other action you can do with extra dice is you can encourage another player. So, for example, let's say I see that Flops is having a rough time. He's gotten the stuffing bee out of him, quite literally. So at the end of my turn, I don't really need this blue die. I'm going to give it to Flops in hopes that he can survive another turn. The other thing you can do with the encourage action, and I love this one, is if they already have a die or they don't need a dice, they need stuffing if they're really low on life, what you can do is spend one of your dice and then give them some of your stuffing. So you're literally giving of yourself, ripping open your stuffing, stuffing it into your friend to kind of keep them inflated, to keep them up, which is not just a great lesson, is a really cool game mechanic. It really encourages, teamwork and working together. So that's awesome. At the end of every person's turn, after they've discarded their dice, they check the threat. If the number of black threat dice is equal to the number of players, then the monsters get a turn. And on a monster turn, they'll activate in order, usually, from top to bottom. So each monster has a series number. So let's say this crawly is going to activate first. I pick up the black die that was next to the crawly on the track here, and then I'm going to roll it. Alright, so I've got a 5. So for this normal crawly, we've got 2 different options. We've got rush and clickety. So 5 would be between a 4 and a 6, so it's clickety. That means I can move up to 3 spaces and then make either a ranged attack or a melee attack. They've got a target move, that's the distance at which they target, and then their attack value. So in this case, he only has a target reach of 1, so if after his 3 moves he's not near someone, He doesn't make an attack. He doesn't have, this particular Crawly doesn't have a ranged attack. Doesn't have any way to shoot people far away. In the event that he is next to a Stuffy, he can make a attack. Now, if the Stuffy has a die in his card, this is when he can use it to roll. So the Crawly's attack value here is 4 with the clickety. So if the Stuffy rolls a 5, he takes no damage. If the Stuffy had rolled a 2, he would take 2 damage from the difference between the 4 and the 2. So it's a defensive capability. Now the Stuffy's defense die, if he rolled high enough to get rid of all the damage. If he took no damage from the attack after rolling, he gets to keep the die. If he only stops some of the damage, the die is discarded. So obviously you want to, obviously you always want to roll high and, you know, not get hurt. But it's even better to roll really high. So that's great. And then this Crawly also has a little follow-up power. After this Crawly attacks, move it 3 spaces towards the closest, and this is the screw and bolt state spot. The game uses a lot of these little symbols as sort of shorthand so that they can have maps that are very elegant. And the screw and bolts is usually where the bad guys spawn. It's the monster spawn point. So basically the Crawly's going to attack and then move as close back to where he started as possible. Basically they're kind of a hit and fade. They're striking attackers. So after that Crawly's done, we go down to the next one, assuming there are more in line, and go through all their attacks, and then we would go back to whoever the next Stuffy is in line as we proceed around. So if a hero was attacking, it works essentially the same way. Now you have to have a weapon. Everybody gets to start out with a choice of weapons from the deck, but basically you get a range of abilities. So you may have a wrench or some rubber bands, which is like a ranged attack, and they'll give you special powers too. So for example, the rubber bands have a range of 4. The little symbol here in the side indicates that it's a handed weapon, so it has to be wielded. And then it's got a +1 in green, which means when you perform a ranged attack, you get to add 1 green die, add 1 to green die results. So it's important to note that that says green die results. So if I roll a green die, I rolled a 2, I add 1 to it, my score is now 3. If I roll a green die and a purple die, I've got a 3, 4, if I'm rolling them together, I've got a 5 because I got to add 1 to the green die. But if I don't have a green die, but I'm rolling a purple die as a wild to make a ranged attack, I still get what's on the die. I still get, in this case, a 6, but I don't get to add 1 because it's not a green die. Even though I'm using it for a ranged attack, the purple die is still a purple die. Important to remember. And then the wrench works the same way, essentially, except it adds actually a +2 if you're not using purple dice at all. So each different weapon will have kind of hit and fade places. And every character should start the game with at least 1 weapon. But if the hero's attack exceeds the Crawly's defense value, in this case it's 5 for the normal Crawly, then the Crawly is destroyed. If the Crawly is or if the minion is a boss or a leader or someone scarier, they may have their own stuffing, so it may take multiple hits to take them out. The stuffing has a dark side on the back, so they'll have tokens on here, and once they run out of stuffing, then they're removed from the board. Whenever you remove a bad guy from the board, you get a button, which is sort of the currency in the game. So you get a button, which is something you can use to buy stuff from vendors and whatnot. And if the bad guy you defeated was a leader or a boss, you get a courageous status card. So there are these status cards that denote the situation of a specific Stuffy. So for example, maybe the Stuffy's worried. In this case, if it has a purple dice stored, discard it. The Stuffy cannot use or store purple dice. And then you remove it by passing a blue skill test of difficulty 4, or by an adjacent Stuffy passing a blue skill test difficulty 2. So your friends, it's easier for your friends to help you than it is to help yourself when you're worried. This game's brilliant. I'm fine. But there's a bunch of different status effects, and in this case, if you defeat a bad guy, you get a courageous. You can store 1 attribute die on this status card. Any player can spend that die when spending dice on her turn. If this Stuffy would become scared, instead of becoming scared, remove this status and discard any die on it. So it lets you store an extra die that anybody can use. So that's great. You take on a leadership role as you're destroying the bad guys. But there's all kinds of different statuses, positive and negative, that are bestowed by various effects in the game. And once all of the minions are defeated, you go back to the storybook and proceed through to see what happens, to make choices to follow it out. And that's kind of the basis of the real quick version of the combat and task resolution system. The one thing we didn't touch on, I mentioned everybody has a unique power, and most of the unique powers are kind of always on at the top. So, for example, Lionel is ferocious. He can use this ability after rolling dice for Lionel. You may re-roll one or more red dice. You must keep your second roll. So he's a melee combatant, so he's not necessarily a melee combatant. I guess you could give him a ranged weapon. But he's a lion. He's Rory. So I want him to be a melee combatant because that's what my life is like. So he can re-roll a red die, or up to, actually he can re-roll one or more. So as many red dice as he has, he can re-roll them. If he wants, he has to take the second rolls on them. But the other abilities you'll see down beneath here have little hearts next to them, and that is for these guys. So as your character does stuff, completes missions, does things, he gets hearts, which can be turned in to use these powers. So none of those powers are on until you have a heart to pay for them. Once you have the heart, you can use any of the powers, assuming the situation comes up. And some of those are really cool and thematic. But basically, they're kind of little upgrades they get for playing through, the ability to do more stuff and be cooler. And they're all unique across all of your characters, so every character has their specific ability card, which is usually tied to a specific color die, although not all of them are. For example, the Stitch is good at doing yellow tasks, he gets the rerolls. Flops is good with green dice. Lumpy's good with, I think, purple. I'm sorry, Lumpy rerolls blue. But then Thea doesn't have a color at all. Once per turn, when taking a turn with Theodora, you may swap one of your attribute dice for an attribute die in the discard pile. And that sounds really amazing to me. The ability to choose what you're going to have turn by turn makes her super versatile. She doesn't get the reroll, so she's not going to roll as well on average, but she has a better chance of having what she needs to roll at the time. And Piggle gets to reroll purple dice, which are wilds, which is pretty sexy. So that's the long and the short of the character cards, of the monster cards, of the basic combat system. But kind of the real sweet spot of this game is its storybook nature. So when you start the story, the first thing that happens at the beginning of the game, you're going to read through the intro here, and parts of it are in italic text, so that's read aloud to the whole group. And basically you're going to gather up weapons. We put out 6 weapons, and everybody picks one. And that's what they're going to be armed with. So you can, of the ones available to you, you can kind of mix and match what they have. Yes, Flops has a bow on his mini, but you don't have to pick the bow. He can go melee. Give that dude a cleaver if you find one. And so then you have a gearing up, and then it'll walk you step by step through the adventure. It'll tell you when to turn the page. It'll tell you when to bring out the bad guys. It'll tell you what the bad guys are doing. And basically each story chunk, we'll call them chapters. I'm not sure if that's officially what they're called. But each chapter in the book, like I said, there's 7, is a different important night in this little girl's life. So they're not continuous. It's not like it's one giant story in 7 chunks, except it is, because everyone's life is a story. We're all stories in the end. But you walk through important nights. So, you know, there may be weeks or years between. So each one's sort of an isolated adventure and part of the larger evolving story of this little girl's life. And they always happen at night while she's asleep. And part of the important part there is we have this sleep deck that's made up of cards that are sleeping, restless, and waking. And every time you start an adventure, you're going to shuffle up the waking card in there. It goes in usually the bottom part of the deck. It'll tell you exactly where based on the adventure. And then you shuffle up the rest of them. And based on how well she's sleeping, the little girl's comfort level determines how well we're doing. You know, if she's restless, things might be worse for us. If she's asleep, they might be better. Or if we get to the waking card, then she's woken up and we've basically lost. We didn't succeed in defending our girl from the dark forces this night. So that's a neat thematic thing. And as we go through the adventure, there's also little side moments, kind of. I mean, it really isn't. It's an adventure. It's an epic scope thing. We'll meet different people. Some of the locations on the board might be vendors, where you know someone will talk to you and they'll buy or sell things. You may be able to buy new items, trade items, stuff like that. There are also these little little conversation boxes, which cause you to draw a random toy card, and then you have a little scene. So, for example, here, if we had drawn ticking toy bomb, warning, warning, system failure imminent, self-destruct in 5, 3. And then you've got a choice. Do you run or do you try to refuse the robot? Not refuse, defuse the robot. So the player to your left draws the card and gives you the options, and then you choose. And some of them are good, some of them are bad. Sometimes they're both good, sometimes they're both bad. That's like life and stuff. So in this case, the choice is run or defuse. If you decide to run, you move your stuffy 4 spaces away. If you defuse the robot, you perform a yellow skill test, difficulty 3. If you pass, then repair successful, said Robbie, and he gave you valuable data. Remove up to 2 threat dice from the threat check. Put all dice in the discard pool back into the bag. Or if you fail the skill check, or you cannot make a yellow skill check because you don't have a yellow die, or a purple die, I guess if you had a wild you could do it. At the end of your turn, all stuffies within 3 spaces of this space receive 3 damage. Oh, so that sucks, yeah. So hopefully you didn't try to defuse the ticking toy bomb if you don't have a yellow die and know about stuff. Because the yellow die is kind of the wisdom, intelligence, noticing stuff, power. So that's great. So like as you go through, they meet different people, they pick up different weapons, they go through adventures. Like we said, each chunk of story, each chapter takes about an hour, hour and a half to play through, and then you get to a story end, and that'll vary based on the choices you've made. And just like a choose your own adventure, it'll say, oh, if you do this, you know, you didn't get there fast enough, the train ran away, go to 5-6 or 523, and then you go to 523, and it tells you you should go to this page, and then these are the bad guys that pop up, or this is what happens. And then you get an ending that'll vary based on your choices. But what I really love is after the ending, you've got little talking points. And it's just 3 or 4 sentences that are kind of things you could discuss afterwards. You know, like, oh, how did you feel about having to abandon that stuffed toy, you know? Or, you know, what was it like then when you failed the little girl? Or it's just talking about the story, the connections that were built in the adventure between the characters, between the players. And it's just kind of a thing for closure, but it's also it's just a bonding moment amongst the team. And that's really what this game, where this game excels. It is a game that is fun for adults, but it's really, really great as a bonding experience between kids and with parents and their children. We spend so much of our time kind of disconnected on devices and cubicles staring at walls. Being able to connect, to sit across the table from someone and really share an adventure is an amazing experience, and it's a very necessary experience, developmentally speaking, for kids. They've already got an expansion that's out for free. There's a free print and play 8th adventure called The Lost Story. It takes place between adventures 3 and 4, I think, if you ever want to play them in order. But it's fully done. I printed mine out. But I mean, it's the size of an actual adventure. You know, there's 5 or 6 different maps. This one's got a car chase in it, which is kind of cool in a board game. And the whole adventure there. There's also a really cool coloring book. If you want, the kids can color their own versions of the stuffies. And the coloring book actually includes 2 super awesome things. One, we get another version of the character card so kids can color their own, but we also get a version without the name so they can name their own adventure, kind of customize it, make it a little more their game, and kind of make each play distinct. And then at the back of the coloring book, we have something I'm super amped about. We have 2 new adventurers. We've got a giraffe stuffy and a puppy stuffy. They've got completely different adventures. This is also free from the publisher's website. So if you want to spice it up a little, bring in some other adventurers, your total count is 8 different ones to select from now. And yeah, so that is Stuffed Fables from Plaid Hat Games. I think it's awesome. I think the quality is amazing. The potential for it as a game type. It just says an adventure book game, and that really makes me hope that there will be more adventure book games. You know, I would buy a licensed Star Wars version of this. I would buy any sort of fantasy or sci-fi adventure with this. The theming on this one is amazing. The kids' toys, the kind of dark fantasy. It's very sort of Jim Henson, Labyrinth, Dark Crystal-y. Mirror Mask, Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman's probably way into this. This seems like the sort of thing he would like. Basically, some of these characters could be from Coraline, actually. I hope I didn't ramble too much for you. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. And stay tuned. We will be bringing you more game stuff at Alter Ego Comics channel.